Hello class. In this video we're going to look at taking our 3D model and putting in only lines. Now depending on your rendering style you may or may not want lines, so I'm going to do it to show you it as an option. Again, many softwares you can pull in just lines only. You certainly can from SketchUp, and we're going to be using it through Adobe 3D today, and I'm going to show you how to play with the settings just to get those lines in. So what I'm going to do, just so we can sort of see what we're going through, is I'm going to turn off the shadow layer that I did in the previous video in this material layer, and this is now we're seeing my 3D model, so I'm going to make sure I'm on that layer. And because of other videos, I turned off the materials for that. What you're going to want to do, if you're going right to lines without first turning off the materials, you're going to want to do that, which just as a recap, under 3D I can go to materials only, and then I can eyeball all of this. It's going to make it sort of white. Like in there, and again I have that in a previous video. The next thing I want to do is I really want to turn off the shadows because I'm only worried about lines. And when I turn off the shadows, I still have some lighting effects going on, so I'm going to even get rid of those, and I'm going to come up to here and I'm going to go to Unlit Texture. I know that I have the textures turned off from the material, so now I just get a blank white screen, which is what I want to start from. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to select lines. All right, and it's going to turn on lines for you. Now, yours might look like this, which is if your threshold is set to 0, you're going to see all the triangulation of the geometry as the original file, and it's not going to look good. But again, there is a way to solve that problem. You just go to Angle Threshold, and you just pull up this line. And really, as soon as I even pull it up ever so slightly, it starts to go away. And for a building that's mainly right angles like this, you don't have to pull it up far. However, if you have some curves in your building, you might need to adjust this threshold to different settings to sort of get the right amount of line detail on that building. And it's possible you might need to do it in steps to do angular parts or the curved parts. But usually, for the most part, you don't need to get that complicated. You just turn it up a little bit, and I've got lines drawn. Now you have some control here. You can change the color of your lines if you want to, and again, if you're doing a rendering, you might want to do that, and you can change it here, which is really nice. Unlike shadows, we didn't really have a lot of control of the coloring. We can change the lines now. So I might just go ahead and do that, just because, like we looked at in the last video, if something is a color, it is far easier to change that color. I can even put it to black if I want, but if it's black, I can't make it a color. So just by default, even just to make it look silly, I'm just gonna go with red just to start this, because then I can sort of change to anything I want by the end of this video. So I'm going to say OK. You can also play with your line weights here. So I'm going to set mine to, just because maybe a little bit strong, I'm going to set mine to 2 just to pull it up a little bit. Again, it's all going to depend on your rendering style. Maybe you don't even want lines at all. But again, the reality is I could always go back and change line width here if I don't like the result. But if you have a thin line that you start with, like a 1 or a 2, you will likely be able to make it bigger pretty easily using Photoshop tricks. So I might even show that as well. I'm going to start with a 2, and hopefully that'll be thin enough. It's looking a little thick here. When it renders, it'll be a little more clear. But I could go with, maybe just for demonstration purposes, maybe I will just sort of sit here at, and I think 1's going to be too small. I'm going to go 2. I'm going to take my chances, see what happens in this video. I might have to re-render it at 1. I'll let you guys know. So I'll go with that one there. And you could do other things. Not that I'm not going to, but if you want to turn on points, you see points pop up, and you can change the style of those too. If you want to add a little detail on the ends, sort of pop it, makes it look a little bit sketchy-ish. There's other things you can do. I'm going to turn that off. I don't want points on mine, but it's an option that you might consider. So I have the lines there. I'm going to hit render on this, and it'll start rendering pretty quick because it's just doing lines. Right, so it didn't even take any real time at all because the lighting was off and stuff. So I'm going to go to layer, just like I did before. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to sort of copy it all. I'm going to go up above my shadows. Oops, I made a new layer. I don't know why I did that. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to put my shadows and paste in my lines. It's going to make the layer. I'm going to pull this layer up above that group, right? And just like before, I'm going to sort of zoom in and sort of move this into place. Now, a lot like shadows, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this layer, I'm going to set it to multiply, and when I multiply it, I should see through it. I multiplied that, and I started to freak out there for a second. What I realized is I have to turn on my materials layer. So there we go. Turn on my materials layer, and now we can see I've got these red lines. Of course, red lines is probably a little bit more silly than I want, but I can go and use a tool up here to change it to be any color. So I'm going to go to Adjust. I can go to Hue Saturation, and I can adjust the colors, and I can certainly make it darker. Actually, I don't want to make that because it's making the whole thing darker. So I want to take the saturation and make it more of that gray. I'm going to turn it more towards yellow. I know it's sort of confusing. I'm going more towards orange by pulling it towards blue. That's because that's just how this thing works. We can see the line sort of getting more orangey as I do that. There's blue right there. There's yellow. And I'm just trying to pull the lines to brown. What I'm also getting confused with here is that this layer is on. So I'm going to say OK. I'm going to turn off that layer so I can only see the lines there. You can see I've made the lines brown, essentially. And I can also do other modes, so I could go to brightness contrast and take up the contrast or take down the contrast of those lines, or and sort of play with that color to sort of get brown lines as needed. Turn on my shadows to sort of see the effect. And you can play with this and get all the line work that you want. You can play with opacity if you want to take down the lines a little bit but still have them to show in that way. And this trick works even if you're getting it from SketchUp or other things. You can change the colors. You might have to play a few more tricks to change the colors. You might have to use the shadow trick if it's coming in from another layer, because you can't get colored lines necessarily. So you can always do that to change the color if you want to. You can keep it black. The other thing I wanted to show is how do you change thicknesses if you want to change thicknesses. So let's take a look at that. This video is getting long, so let me pause it and redo or stop it and do a different video there.